Think about this: in major events, it's often the small details that can make or break them. For example, think about the 1986 Challenger disaster, where a cheap O-ring. Music, think about this: the little things can make or break a big event. Remember the 1986 Challenger disaster? A cheap O-ring led to the loss of 7 lives and millions of dollars. Similarly, a tiny blood clot, barely visible under a microscope, can be fatal by blocking blood flow to a critical part of the brain. Even a small patch of ice on the road can cause a vehicle to spin out of control and result in a deadly crash. The list goes on. Seemingly insignificant factors can have devastating consequences for significant endeavors. Marriage certainly falls into the category of important undertakings. I, for one, hold my marriage in high regard. I've been married for just over 8 years to my lovely wife, April. We have 2 amazing boys, Chris and Charles. I didn't earn a college degree, but my skills as a mechanic have provided us with a comfortable life in a spacious home. Despite the long hours I put into my job, the financial stability it brings makes it worthwhile. My marriage has always been the highlight of my life, and I've worked diligently to support my family. Unfortunately, it's often the small things that can unravel such significant commitments. In my case, it was a tiny blood. There's a part of my brain that's been causing all sorts of problems. It's been getting really close to another part, and that's led to some pretty bad swelling. It's triggered a migraine headache, and I had one of those on a particularly bad day. I'm pretty familiar with the symptoms, like being sensitive to light, loud sounds, and bad smells. But the pain that hit me out of the blue was really intense. I didn't have my Imitrex inhaler, so I couldn't do anything about it. I had pills on hand, but they weren't as effective and took a while to kick in. I couldn't work, so I went to my boss's office with the bad news. He immediately started taking action, calling his secretary, Penny, and telling her to get me home safely. He insisted that I not drive. "For heaven's sake, go now," he said, with Penny's help. My boss carefully guided me out of the office and down the hallway towards the exit. Once outside, Penny helped me lean against the wall, shielding my eyes from the harsh light, as she went to her car. I kept my eyes shut tightly and pressed my hands against my temples. I was trying to ease the throbbing pain as we drove, but my vision was blurring and the light was too much. I had to keep my eyes closed. The sounds around me turned into a really loud buzz, and the bad smell made my stomach churn. Thankfully, Penny knew the way to my house, so I didn't need to give directions. It felt like forever, but eventually, she pulled up outside my home, helped me out of the car, and guided me inside. I followed her lead, barely able to walk on my own. Once in the kitchen, I told Penny to get her inhaler from. She gave me the medicine and helped me put it in my nose. I took a deep breath as it went into my bloodstream. Then, I asked her to go with me to the living room next to the kitchen and help me onto the sofa. I asked her to close the curtains and turn off the lights, which she did right away. After a few minutes, I could already feel some relief coming on, so I told Penny she could go. I thanked her for her help and was glad when she left. I dozed off pretty quickly as the pain eased up, but then I woke up later to the sound of voices. The room was all dark, so it was probably later in the day. When I remembered my surroundings, I realized the pain had gone away, leaving me feeling a little sore but relieved from the migraine. I sat up carefully for a moment, waiting, half expecting the pain to return, but it didn't. Thank God. In the dimness, I recognized the voices of my wife, April, and her neighbor friend Robin. It seemed I was hidden from their view because it was dark and the lights were off. Maybe April thought I was just chillin' after coming home early, but my car wasn't in the driveway. She probably didn't even know I was here. I could totally surprise them both. I got up quietly, planning to sneak to the door and then make my presence known. But then I tuned into their convo. "Hey April, how was it? Was it as good as before? Tell me the details, girl." "It was amazing. I felt like I was in heaven, even better than last time. I swear, almost mind-blowing. I'm having the best physical relationship ever, better than with Chris, better than with your husband. I love Chris, but he never made me feel like that. I would never let him do those things. He thinks I'm a slut, but Carl knows, and I like it. Can't wait for next time. Aren't you afraid Chris will find out? Have you considered the consequences, Chris? I had the best sex of my life with Chris. Better than with your husband, even. I love Chris, but he never made me feel like that. I would never let him do those things. He thinks I'm a strumpet, but Carl knows, and I like it. Can't wait for next time. Aren't you afraid Chris will find out? Have you thought about the consequences? Chris will never know, and even if he did, he wouldn't risk losing the kids. I'd take them in a heartbeat with a good lawyer. This isn't like you, April. It's worrying. I think you're making a big mistake. I love Chris, truly, but I won't give up what I have with Carl. I want both the passion with Carl and the love with Chris. I need both, and I won't let go. I've had my fill, though. The migraine subsided, but the ache in my heart was far worse. It gripped me so tightly that my stomach knotted, and each breath felt like a struggle. A ringing filled my ears, and my pulse thundered in my head. Fear surged through me as if a heart attack loomed, and I clung to the door frame until I kept my presence hidden, but with each returning moment of control, fury simmered within me, threatening to boil over with resolve. I straightened and stepped into the illuminated kitchen, shattering the silence. Robin was the first to notice me, her eyes widening in shock as she fell silent. April caught Robin's reaction, turned to see me, her expression shifting from contentment to astonishment, then to dread, and finally to anger, all in an instant. She pushed her chair back and rose to confront me. "How much did you hear? Why were you lurking and spying on me?" she demanded. I met her gaze in silence, then glanced at Robin, who wasted no time in excusing herself. Robin's reaction turned to see me, and her expression shifted from contentment to astonishment, then to dread, and finally to anger, all in an instant. She pushed her chair back and confronted me. "How much did you hear?" she demanded. "Why were you lurking and spying on me?" I met her gaze in silence, then glanced at Robin, who wasted no time in excusing herself. "I need to go. Pete, and I can take care of the boys if you need time. I'll call you later," she said before hurrying out the side door. I watched her departure wordlessly. Left alone, I turned my attention back to April, the woman I cherished unconditionally for 8 blissful years, 8 years I thought would stretch into eternity. "Where would I need to go, Pete? Robin's with the boys, and I'll take care of them. I'll call you later." She said that before hurrying out the side door. I watched her leave, wordlessly. I turned my attention back to April, the woman I cherished unconditionally for 8 blissful years. I thought we'd grow old together, but tonight, that expectation shattered. There would be no forever for us. April ended it all tonight. Where are the boys? What were you up to while you were having your fun with your lover? Did you even think about them? Or were you too busy enjoying yourself with someone else while leaving them unattended? Now, I'm composed and collected. We had a long talk tonight, but it didn't go so well. I'm still pretty upset about it. It'll take a while to get over it. April got mad at me, saying I was being a jerk. She said I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys. She said I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, and that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her, And that I was being a jerk to the boys, and that I was being a jerk to her. The pain still lingers, sharp and deep. It'll take a while for it to ease. April's face was twisted with anger, masking her beauty with ugliness. Perhaps that mask was the real April, hidden beneath the surface all along. She retorted, "The boys are with Carly. Robin and I went shopping, and Pete watched over them. I wasn't with anyone else, just Robin." With that statement, she seemed to feel victorious. The anger on her face morphed into satisfaction, finally realizing I'd been at home. She inquired, "What are you doing here? Where's your car, and why were you sitting in the dark? Were you spying on me, trying to catch me in the act?" "I came home early with a terrible migraine. George asked Penny to drive me." She seemed pretty pleased with herself. Her anger turned into satisfaction as she finally realized I'd been at home. She asked what I was doing there, where my car was, and why I was sitting in the dark. Was I spying on her? Trying to catch her in the act? "I came home early with a bad migraine, so George asked Penny to drive me home because I couldn't handle the light. I took my Imitrex and fell asleep. I've been here ever since." A queasiness in my stomach and a strong urge to vomit hit me. I got up and hurried to the bathroom. "You woke me up, and what I heard made me sick. I need the bathroom." With those words, I ran to the bathroom, trying to puke. Contents of my stomach. It wasn't entirely successful, but my body certainly tried its best. I settled onto the bathroom floor, finding relief as my body gradually relaxed against the cool porcelain. Finally, my stomach calmed and my breathing steadied. The sweat on my face dried as the nausea faded away. After a few moments, I rose, splashing water on my. I felt like I'd been sick, but I guess my body was just trying to get things out. I ended up on the bathroom floor, and it felt good to relax against the cold porcelain. After a while, my stomach calmed down, my breathing got steady, and the sweat on my face dried. After a few minutes, I got up, splashed water on my face, and rinsed my mouth. When the shaking stopped and I felt more composed, I went back to the kitchen, where April was sitting and looking out the window. "I'm going to get the boys and put them to bed tonight." I brushed past her and went to the Andersons' house. Pete and Robin Anderson were not only our neighbors, but also our closest friends. After I got my composure back, I went back to the kitchen where April was sitting. I told her I was going to get the boys and put them to bed. I brushed past her and went to the Andersons' house. Pete and Robin were not only our neighbors, but also our closest friends. We had spent countless evenings together, chatting and enjoying drinks. We were best friends. I thought about what Pete knew. I should have asked. I knocked on their back door and went in. I saw that Robin was sitting at the kitchen table talking with her husband. I could tell she had told him. He looked up with pity in his eyes as I entered. Friends, we had shared countless evenings together, chatting and enjoying drinks. Best friends, I mused, bitterly. What did Pete know? I should have asked. I knocked on their back door and entered to find Robin seated at the kitchen table, talking with her husband. I sensed she had told him. He looked up with pity in his eyes as I entered. Robin appeared visibly uneasy. "I've come to get the boys. Are they ready to head home?" I bypassed Pete and went to the living room, where I presumed the boys were with Carly, their teenage daughter. They were huddled over a puzzle. Carly was watching over them as I entered. She greeted me with a smile. "Hey, Mr. Phillips, are you here for them?" she asked, upon my nod. Robin looked visibly upset. I asked, "Are the boys ready to head home?" I went to the living room, where I thought the boys were with Carly, their teenage daughter. They were working on a puzzle. Carly was watching over them as I came in. She greeted me with a smile and said, "Hey, Mr. Phillips, are you here for them?" I nodded. She said, "I'll grab their jackets." I stood there, feeling overwhelmed by a wave of sadness. These scenes, once filled with everyday joy, now showed the mark of infidelity. The innocence of family life was shattered by the selfishness of adults, in many cases irreparably so. This felt like one of those times. "Thanks, Carly. I'll be in the kitchen when they're." "I'll grab their jackets," I said. I stood there, feeling pretty overwhelmed by all this sadness. These scenes, which used to be full of everyday joy, now felt like they were tainted by infidelity. The innocence of family life was shattered by the selfishness of adults, and in many cases, it was irreparable. This felt like one of those times. "Thanks, Carly, I'll be in the kitchen when they're ready." I went back to the kitchen, where Petty and Robin were still seated. I looked at Robin, then at Petty. "Did you both know? Were you aware she cheated on me? Did it give you some twisted satisfaction knowing while we were together? Did it give you some sick thrill?" My anger fueled my words, making them harsher than necessary, but I needed answers from my dear friends. I should have sensed something. Pete shot a glance at Robin. I went back to the kitchen, where Pete and Robin were still sitting. I looked at Robin, then at Pete. "Did you two know? Were you aware she cheated on me? Did it make you feel weird knowing that we were together? Did it give you some sick thrill?" My anger made me say harsh things, but I needed answers from my friends. I should have sensed something. Pete shot a glance at Robin, and his anger was obvious before he said a word. "Swear, buddy, I had no clue. If I had known, I would have told you right away. I can't believe my wife knew and kept it from me. It's despicable. You don't deserve this. I won't apologize to her, but I'm here for you if you need me." His gaze hardened as he looked at his wife. I believed him. He would have confided in me if he had known. So that was Robin and April's secret. "Thank you, Rob." "Robin," he sneered, "thanks for making me a laughing stock, a betrayed man, and a fool who didn't need to know his wife was fooling around with another guy. I hope that sits well with you, knowing what you knew while thinking of me." I turned as I noticed Carly approaching hastily, putting on a smile as the boys emerged, each clutching a cookie. I silently prayed that Carly hadn't overheard my last words, but the look on her face suggested otherwise. "Thanks for making me the joke, for making me look like a fool. I hope you're happy knowing what you did while thinking of me." I turned as I noticed Carly approaching quickly, putting on a smile as the boys came out, each holding a cookie. I silently hoped Carly hadn't heard my last words, but her face said otherwise. This was the last time Robin would spend with my boys. I promised I didn't know how, but I'd figure it out. We went in through the back door, and the boys hurried upstairs to change for dinner. I crossed the empty kitchen into the dim living room where April sat, keeping the room dark like the secrets she harbored. I turned on a lamp and opened the curtains to light up the space. Otherwise, this was the last time Robin would spend this much time with my boys. I promised I'd figure out how, even if I didn't know how. We came in through the back door, and the boys went upstairs to change for dinner. I crossed the empty kitchen into the dimly lit living room, where April sat, keeping the room as dark as the secrets she was hiding. I turned on a lamp and opened the curtains to light up the space, showing shadows that hinted at the truths my once loving wife was hiding. April looked awful. Her eyes were red, her skin was pale, she was slouching, and her shoulders were down. All the defiance had melted away, leaving behind the fearful woman I thought she was, but it felt too late for that. Instead of making her feel better, her newfound vulnerability disgusted me. Was she truly remorseful now, or was she just scared? I couldn't believe it. Shadows revealed the truths my wife used to hold. April looked awful, her eyes were red, her skin was pale, she slumped over, and her shoulders were down. I thought she'd changed, but it was too late. Instead of comforting her, her newfound vulnerability disgusted me. Was she truly remorseful, or was she just scared? I couldn't believe such a drastic change in such a short time. This was the start of our power struggle. A deceitful wife concealing her infidelity. Her face betrayed not regret but deception. I confronted her, demanding, "Who is he? What does he offer that I don't?" She remained silent until I was sure she wouldn't respond. As I turned to leave, she finally spoke. "His identity doesn't matter. It's not about you, Chris. I'm deeply sorry." A sudden change, all in the blink of an eye. This was the start of our power struggle. A sneaky wife hiding her affair. Her face showed not regret, but deception. I confronted her, demanding, "Who is he? What does he offer that I don't?" She didn't say a word until I was sure she wouldn't. As I turned to leave, she finally spoke. His identity doesn't matter. It's not about you, Chris. I'm really sorry. You found out like this. I never intended to hurt you. I never wanted you to discover this. I'm truly sorry. You heard my conversation with Robin, please. You must understand. It's funny. No apologies for the ACT. No remorse for its occurrence, just regret for being caught and you learning the truth. I shook my head, sinking into the plush armchair she gifted me on our 5th anniversary. I once cherished it, but now it was just. You found out the hard way. I never intended to hurt you. I never wanted you to discover this. I am truly sorry. You heard my conversation with Robin, and I hope you understand that it's funny. I'm not sorry for what I did, or for being caught, just for being remorseful and for you learning the truth. I shook my head, sinking into the plush armchair she gifted me on our 5th anniversary. I once cherished it, but now it was just furniture. Please, let me explain. Our story doesn't have to end here. We can salvage what we had. If only you try to understand, we could move forward. She pleaded with me, a familiar expression when she desired something I disagreed with. Can you promise it's over? That you'll never see him again? I maintained a calm tone, but my body tensed. I gripped the chair's arms tightly with my hands for control. April met my gaze with teary eyes. Furniture, please. Let me explain. Our story doesn't have to end here. We can salvage what we had. If only you try to understand. We could move forward. She pleaded with me, a familiar expression when she desired something I disagreed with. She said, "Can you promise it's over? That you'll never see him again?" I maintained a calm tone, but my body tensed. My hands gripped the chair's arms tightly, and I was on the verge of an outburst. April met my gaze with tear-filled eyes, but offered no reply. That silence spoke volumes. She wouldn't cease. I heard her words to Robin. She sought both paths and wouldn't let me hinder her. She wasn't willing to relinquish him and sought my approval. I believe this is your decision. After dinner, I'll tuck the boys in, then we can explore our options. Tomorrow, I'll pack my belongings and stay with my brother. Rising, I exited to the kitchen, a refuge. Filled eyes, but no answer. Silence spoke volumes. She wouldn't stop. I heard her to Robin. She chose both paths and wouldn't let me stop her. She wasn't willing to give up on him and wanted my approval. I think this is your decision. After dinner, I'll tuck the boys in, then we can look at our options. Tomorrow I'll pack my things and stay with my brother. Rising, I went to the kitchen, a place of calm. It's strange how the kitchen becomes a sanctuary when things are chaotic. When your world crumbles, strange thoughts come up. It's even weirder to realize your world is crumbling. April was busy with dinner while I spent time with the boys in the playroom, playing with them. April called us for dinner, and we went to the bathroom to wash up. Normal things, like. It's strange how the kitchen becomes a sanctuary during tough times. When your world crumbles, it's even weirder to realize your world is crumbling. April was busy with dinner while I spent some quality time with the boys in the playroom, engrossed in their game. April called us for dinner, and it was a bit of a noisy transition. I ushered the boys to the bathroom to wash up, and then we all got to anchor in chaos. Dinner was lively. The boys were full of energy and loved the meal in each other's company. This was a sharp contrast to their subdued parents, who were lost in thought about looming decisions. Ah, the innocence of childhood slipping away. Why do kids yearn to grow up? They perceive adult freedom as boundless, unaware of the consequences and responsibilities adults understand. Some disregard limits and consequences, though. After dinner, April cleaned the kitchen while I took the boys to bed. We shared stories until they fell asleep, dreaming up whatever they wanted. My heart hurt as I watched, knowing this too must end. Downstairs, I sat down and tried to calm down. My world slipped away. I loved April deeply, but her words made me feel this way, and he's a player, and I'm his strumpet. There was no turning back after I heard those words. I thought about it, and I felt the love inside me go out. April came in and sat down. We need to talk. I know you're upset, but you have to understand my point of view. What I have with Carl is just physical and new. I know it'll fade soon, but right now I can't seem to break away. It's what makes me feel good, but it doesn't affect. I realized that I couldn't change what I felt. April came in and sat down. We need to talk. I know you're upset, but you have to understand my point of view. What I have with Carl is just physical and new. I know it won't last, but right now I can't seem to stop. It's what gets me going, but it doesn't affect my love for you. He's just a distraction, that's all. It'll end soon, and we can go back to how things were. You just have to let it run its course. Her words flowed, but I struggled to understand. I can't resist this. I can't stop seeing him. Should I let this continue? Is she irrational, or just deluded? You have to see reality. There's no us. There's just you and him. That's all that's left. It's over between us. This is finished. There's no negotiating. I won't budge. You need to understand this. Even after 8 years of marriage, you can't believe I'd condone your affair, but, Chris, I love you. You're the only man I've ever loved. I don't even like Carl. Please try to understand. Give me time, please. Baby, for the sake of our marriage and family, give me time. Take all the time. You need to get this taken care of ASAP. I'll talk to a lawyer, and we'll split everything 50-50. I don't want to hurt you like you hurt me. I just want this to end. I was totally drained. I was ready to head to bed and take a break from the heartache. My headache had calmed down, but I was still feeling the anguish. But I wasn't ready for her next words. Damn you, no divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way and take everything you have. I'll ensure. You need to get this over with. I'll talk to a lawyer, and we'll split everything fair. I don't want to hurt you like you hurt me. I just want this to end. Emotionally drained, I wanted to go to bed and take a break from the heartache. My headache had calmed down, but the pain remained. But I wasn't ready for what she said next. Damn you, no divorce. I'll fight you every step of the way and take everything you have. I'll make sure you don't get custody of the boys, and I'll limit your visitation rights in every way possible. If you don't comply, you'll lose everything, and I'll still have Carl. You can't stop me. Remember that I absorbed her threat. Then it hit me that this marriage had been over a long time ago. The level of anger and disrespect wasn't sudden. It was calculated and deliberate. She never meant to hurt me. If she had, she wouldn't. If you don't cooperate, I'll limit your visitation rights as much as possible. If you don't comply, you'll lose everything, and I'll still have Carl. You can't stop me, remember? I took her threat into consideration. Then it hit me that this marriage had been over a long time ago. The level of anger and disrespect wasn't sudden, it was calculated and deliberate. She never intended to hurt me. If she had, she wouldn't have. She would have ended it before. Instead, she anticipated my discovery. Rather than ending her affair, she chose to inflict as much pain as possible on me. Love had no place here, only greed and the urge to degrade me. As my anger simmered, I saw her face show that she had gone too far. Her expression changed from contentment to fear. My words followed. I have one thing. I've started this journey, and I'm not going to stop now. I knew she'd push me to my limit, and she did. Love wasn't in the picture for her, she was just after my money and wanted to bring me down. As my anger grew, I saw her face change from contentment to fear. Her words shifted from venomous to scared. I said, April, when you corner a rat, it fights back. It'll fight to the bitter end if you deny it any chance of escape. You should have known that before pushing me, but now you've done it, and you'll pay the price. Please, Chris. I don't want this, but I'm left with no choice. I love you and will do anything to keep you from leaving. If you don't understand and accept this, I'll fight you. You'll have no option but to stay with me. Chris, I know you love me and the boys too much to leave. I know you'll stay. April, let the boys know I'll see them when I can. I'll gather some belongings and leave. I'll retrieve the rest later, when we can arrange a time upstairs. I hastily packed a bag for a day or so, just essentials, a few changes of clothes, and some toiletries. After 8 years of marriage, all that remained were bitter memories. I know you love me and the boys too much to leave. I know you, Chris. You'll stay. Goodbye, April. Let the boys know I'll see them when I can. I'll gather some belongings and leave. I'll retrieve the rest later, when we can arrange a time. Upstairs, I hastily packed a bag for a day or so. Just essentials, from the bathroom, a few changes of clothes. Not much. After 8 years of marriage, all that remained were bitter memories. But I had 2 wonderful sons, and that was my focus now. Descending, I found April seated by the kitchen door. Evidently, she was prepared to try again. Chris, please reconsider. I'm begging you. There's no need. Promise me you'll end things with him. You'll never see him again. Just say it, and maybe there's hope. I can't. I just can't, please. I pushed past her, fighting the urge to strike her with all my might, but I knew controlling myself. I had 2 great sons, and that was my focus. Now, as I went down, I saw April sitting by the kitchen door. She was ready to try again. Chris, please think again. There's no need. Promise me you'll end things with him. You'll never see him again. Just say it, and maybe there's hope. I couldn't. I pushed past her, fighting the urge to hit her, but I knew controlling the anger inside wouldn't be easy. I'll visit in the evenings after work, so the boys won't notice anything right away. I opened the door and stepped outside. It slammed shut behind me as I tossed my bag into the back seat and climbed into my truck. Backing out of the garage, I dialed Clyde, my brother, on my cell phone. He lived about 10 miles away. Ever since his wife left with her boyfriend, he hadn't been the same. I kept my cool, but I was pretty ticked off inside. I figured I'd swing by in the evenings after work, so the boys wouldn't notice anything right away. I opened the door and went outside. It slammed shut behind me. I tossed my bag into the back seat and climbed into my truck. I backed out of the garage and dialed Clyde, my brother, on my cell phone. He lived about 10 miles away. 2 years ago, he'd been living alone, clueless about his wife's whereabouts and indifferent to her absence. Despite not divorcing, Clyde refused to let it hold him back. He'd become quite the drinker, often indulging with his buddies almost every night. We discussed it, but Clyde never changed his ways. He rarely got drunk, though he was usually high. Perhaps he was trying to bury memories. That was my take, at least. He listened. He was living alone, not knowing where April was or how she was doing. He didn't care. He wasn't going to let his marriage to Clyde stop him from doing what he wanted to do. He was a big drinker, and he'd often drink with his friends, almost every night. We talked about it, but Clyde never changed his ways. He didn't drink much, but he was usually high. Maybe he was trying to forget the past. That was my take, at least. He listened to what I had to say. As I explained, I told him to head over, and he'd be home later, so I drove to his place. I got the spare key from under the flower pot on the porch and let myself in. Everything was just as I remembered it. It was always clean and tidy. Clyde was far from messy. He was always tidy. It made me feel better to see that, even though I went over to his place, and he was home later than expected. I drove there, got the spare key from under the flower pot on the porch, and let myself in. Everything was just as I left it, tidy and well-maintained, just like Clyde. It was comforting to see that despite my life crumbling, his remained the same. I grabbed a couple of beers from the fridge and got comfortable, just like he'd said I should. By the time he got back, I was already a little tipsy. I got another beer from the store and kept drinking. When Clyde arrived, I just told him about the fight with April, and he joined in drinking the rest. He made sure I didn't go overboard, telling me he had my back, and that we were like brothers. The next morning, I woke up with a terrible hangover and a headache. I knew I'd overindulged, but I had a good reason. Still, it wasn't an excuse. I hopped in the shower, and the cold water helped me feel better. Intoxicant in my system. Staying drunk was pointless. I looked for Clyde and found a note saying he was at work and would report me, which wasn't a surprise since we both had Saturday shifts. Clyde and I worked for a company renting heavy construction equipment to major contractors all over the state. We were known as the best. We were known as the best mechanics around, and we had customers from all over. Our job was to keep the machines running, no matter what. The job was hard, but it paid well enough to support my family. I didn't really understand how important it was to keep earning that money. April's pride and joy, was the spacious house we were working so hard to pay for. I saw it as a safe place for our family, a source of Notch Mechanics brought in customers from far and wide. Our job was to keep the machines running, no matter what. The job was hard, but it paid well enough to support my family. I didn't really understand how important it was to keep earning that money to support my family. April's pride and joy was the big house we lived in. I thought of it as a haven for our family, a source of pride in providing for them. But April saw it differently. To her, it was a safety net, a way to use the house and my earnings to pressure me into a divorce. She wanted the house and my earnings not to keep our family safe, but to fund her lover's indulgences, like fancy clothes and trips to Victoria's Secret and lingerie purchases. I turned up the faucet to drown out these unsettling thoughts, even though I was running late. I needed to get away from it all to work, where I could focus, strategize, and make decisions. I couldn't do that in my current state. April had clearly plotted this in advance, anticipating my shock upon discovering her betrayal and knowing I wouldn't think clearly. She had manipulated the situation to portray me as the villain for disapproving of her affair, stacking the deck in her favor. I dressed and fetched a box. I needed to get away from work so I could focus on my tasks. I couldn't do that in my current state. April had clearly planned this in advance, anticipating my shock upon discovering her affair and knowing I wouldn't think clearly. She had manipulated the situation to portray me as the villain for disapproving of her affair, stacking the deck in her favor. I dressed and fetched a box of large trash bags, anticipating April's departure with the boys to her mother's house. Inside, I emptied my closet and drawers into the bags. I gathered essential items from the bathroom into a smaller bag. Laden with bags, I loaded them into my truck's back seat and returned inside. I wouldn't leave just yet. I intended to return after work to spend time with the children. I had much to ponder and decide. I emptied my closet and drawers into trash bags, filling them with large trash bags. I gathered essential items from the bathroom into a smaller bag. I loaded them into my truck's back seat and went back inside. I wasn't going to leave just yet. He was planning to return after work to spend time with the kids. I had a lot to think about and decide. One thing was certain, my marriage was over, and April would never again be my wife, lover, or confidant. She belonged to someone else now. As I thought about it, tears welled up uncontrollably, and I sank to the floor of what once was our bedroom, overcome with grief. Loss weighs heavily, especially at work. I threw myself into my duties, working hard even through lunch breaks, eager to drown out thoughts. I knew my marriage was over, and April was going to be out of my life forever. She was going to be with someone else. I sat down on the floor of our old bedroom and cried. I was really sad, especially at work. I worked really hard, even during lunch breaks. I didn't want to think about my family at home. I was dealing with fuel injectors, timing chains, and fuel pumps. I worked really hard on the toughest parts of the job. I didn't want to stop. 10 hours later, Clyde interrupted me and told me to take a break. He said, "Dude, you're making the rest of us look like slackers." He looked at me with a mix of surprise and concern. He said, "Sorry, little brother. Just trying to lose." I was busy with work, home, and family, and dealing with the challenges of fuel injectors, timing chains, and fuel pumps. I tackled the toughest tasks without complaining, consumed by a fervor to bury myself in work. 10 hours later, Clyde interrupted, urging me to take a break. "Dude, ease up. You're making the rest of us look like slackers, he remarked, watching me with a mixture of surprise and concern. Sorry, little brother. Just trying to lose myself in it all, just trying to forget my bad. I must have seemed on the verge of tears as Clyde guided me off the shop floor and into the break area. Clyde and I had been inseparable since our parents' tragic accident a decade ago. He had been my best man at the wedding, and 8 years ago, he became the godfather to my boys, Chris and Charlie. Seated at the table, I stared blankly as Clyde poured us each a. I was trying to forget my bad. I must have seemed like I was about to cry as Clyde guided me off the shop floor and into the break area. Clyde and I had been inseparable since our parents' tragic accident a decade ago. He had been my best man at the wedding, and 8 years ago, he became the godfather to my boys, Chris Jr. and Charlie. Seated at the table, I stared blankly as Clyde poured each of us a cup of hot coffee, devoid of flavor but comforting in its warmth. I told him everything. Clyde encouraged me, prompting me to recount the ordeal in detail for the next 10 minutes. I poured out to Clyde every ounce of shame, humiliation, and contempt April had heaped upon me. I divulged her menacing threats, her calculated attempts to undermine any retaliation on my part while safeguarding. I poured a cup of hot coffee, with no flavor but comforting warmth. I told Clyde everything that had happened, no holding back. Clyde encouraged me, and I recounted the ordeal in detail for the next 10 minutes. I poured out to Clyde every bit of shame, humiliation, and contempt April had heaped upon me. I told him about her menacing threats, her calculated attempts to undermine any retaliation on my part while safeguarding her affair. I recounted the disdain on her face as she boasted to Robin about her triumph and the cold determination in her threats to strip me of everything. It was abundantly clear that her lover's gratification was paramount. Unwilling to relinquish him for anything, Clyde was taken aback. He had always regarded April highly, seeing her as a virtuous woman and dedicated mother. His brother had never hinted at anything like this. I told him about the look on her face as she told Robin about her hurt and the cold determination in her threats to strip me of everything. It was clear as day that her lover was more important to her than anything. Clyde was surprised. He had always thought highly of April, seeing her as a good woman and a dedicated mother. His brother had never hinted at any marital issues. So, Clyde had always thought their marriage was solid. Now, he was facing the reality of Chris's pain and anguish. It hurt Clyde just to witness it. Chris was a pillar of strength, a devoted father, a reliable provider, and a trusted confidant for the guys in the garage. He was always there when needed. Over the years, he had gone above and beyond to help others. But Clyde's shock turned to anger. How could Clyde was shocked by what April did to Chris? He was angry, and he felt indignant. He felt that his brother and closest friend were shattered and defeated. He told Chris, "You can't just accept this. We have to take action. Let me and the guys lend a hand. This is unbearable." Clyde's concerned expression was obvious. He really cared about his brother. Chris met his gaze with a despondent look. Clyde felt indignant as he watched Chris get hurt. "What's wrong with her? Why is she doing this to him?" he asked, feeling upset. "We can't just let this happen. We have to do something. Let me and Chris help out." Clyde was worried about his brother. Chris looked at him with a sad face. "What can I do if I get a divorce? She'll take everything from me, including the kids. She'll take the house, the car, and the money. She's using the kids as pawns against me. Now that idiot she's dating is going to replace their dad. He's an idiot who thinks it's okay to cheat on their mom. I can't do anything about it. I'm powerless." Clyde shook his head. "Forget both of them. I used to love. April was like a sister to me, but now she's got to deal with the consequences. We need to go after both of them. First, we need to figure out who he is. That'll be easy. I'll make a couple of calls, and then we'll talk." Clyde declared, "I'm just here to listen." I shrugged. "All right, but I'm not sure what you expect me to do. She doesn't share anything about him with me." "Doesn't matter. We'll track him down and expose him like we would anyone else, and you realize you can't take April back. What she did makes it impossible to reconcile. If you condone her actions, she'll never respect you again. No way, man. She's someone else's plaything now. His words caught me off guard momentarily, but then a faint smile crept onto my face. You're right. She's not my beloved wife anymore. Last night taught me how swiftly love can morph into hatred. You realize you can't take April back, right? What she did makes it impossible to reconcile. If you condone her actions, she'll never respect you again. No way, man. She's someone else's plaything now. His words caught me off guard momentarily, but then a faint smile crept onto my face. You're right. She's not my beloved wife anymore. Last night taught me how swiftly love can morph into hatred. My animosity towards her today eclipses any love I ever had for her last night. She stole that from me and turned it against herself. I made that clear to her. We continued chatting a bit more, then wrapped up work without any extra hours. We headed to a nearby bar with no intention of getting drunk. This was business, we needed to make plans. Clyde made a few more calls, and we sat down to strategize. I was touched. I was pretty annoyed with her at the time, and I told her as much. She took that out on herself. I made that clear to her when we were chatting a bit more after work. We didn't add on extra hours, and we headed to a nearby bar. I wasn't planning on getting drunk, I just needed to make some business plans. Clyde made a few more calls, and we sat down to strategize. I was touched by the unwavering support from my friends. They didn't pry, just wanted to know how they could help. Together, we came up with a feasible plan. At 7 that evening, I pulled into my driveway and went into the house. It struck me as funny that this wasn't my home anymore, it was just a place to stay. I shed my jacket in the kitchen. I went to the living room, where April was sitting in her chair watching Chris and Charlie, our 5-year-old twins. My friends were super supportive. They didn't try to pry, they just wanted to help. We came up with a plan that night. At 7, I pulled into my driveway and went into the house. It was funny to me that this wasn't my home anymore. It was just a place to stay. I put my jacket in the kitchen. I went to the living room, where April was sitting in her chair watching Chris and Charlie, our 5-year-old twins, play a video game. I stood there and remembered the whole scene. April looked at me, and I looked back at her. She had a faint smile, but it showed how she really felt about me and our fake family. It was all a scheme she had set up. I saw that now. The twins, aged 1, were engrossed in a video game. I stood there, taking in the scene. April met my gaze as I glanced at her. Her faint smile revealed her true contempt for me and our family facade. It was all a scheme orchestrated by her deception. I understood this now. I returned her gaze with a look of disdain, without a smile. When I turned away, she averted her eyes and headed to the kitchen. I peered into the fridge, pulling out what appeared to be leftover fried chicken and mashed potatoes. I reheated them in the microwave. I looked away, not saying a word. I wasn't hungry, but I needed a break. I had wanted to talk with the boys before bed, but Clyde said no, told me to wait. When I do talk with them, it'll be Mark's first move in the battle April started. I might be doubting myself, but I'll fight to the end. I sat down, ate slowly, not really enjoying the food, but I needed it. About halfway through, April joined me at the table, sitting across from me. I looked at her quickly before looking away again. I was chewing my food, trying not to say anything. I didn't want to argue with her right then, and I didn't have anything to say. Are you feeling more composed after last night? Can we have a civilized conversation? Her words caught me off guard. Civilized adults? How about a cheating woman and her betrayed husband? That's more realistic. I didn't say anything. Are you going to ignore me now? Acting childish and silent? I had higher expectations of you, Chris. We need to consider the children now. You must remember your role as their father. I'm starting to wonder if I'm really their dad. Maybe I should do some tests to confirm. Let's keep this civil. No anger, just a simple statement. April's expression darkened with fury, ready to retort, when I calmly said, "Watch your tone, April. The kids might overhear if you start shouting. Remember them, too. I'm starting to wonder if I'm really their dad. Maybe I should get some tests to confirm. Let's keep this civil." No anger, just a simple statement. April's expression darkened with fury, ready to retort when I calmly interjected, "Watch your tone, April. The kids might overhear if you start shouting. Remember them, the ones you accused me of neglecting last night when I got upset. Well, now it's your turn to remember, to reflect on what you've done to their world. Not only did you indulge in an affair, you shattered our entire family. Think carefully, April." April paused, lowering her voice to a hiss. "You didn't seem to consider my words last night. I expected. You're the one who accused me of neglecting you last night when I got upset. Well, now it's your turn to remember, reflect on what you've done to their world. Not only did you have an affair, you shattered our entire family. Think carefully, April." April paused, lowering her voice to a hiss. "You didn't seem to consider my words last night. I expected you to move past this and return to normal. Nothing will change at home. I still love you, and you are my husband. That hasn't changed. Neither you nor the children will lose anything familiar. I keep my affairs discreet, conducting my business when they're at school and you're at work. You have nothing to lose, as I'm always here for you." I didn't say anything, just kept eating. I didn't react at all. My eyes showed everything, even if I didn't say anything. April finally understood how serious this was. She started to feel afraid. "What do you think? What do you intend to do? Will you make things difficult for me? I hoped you loved me enough to grant me this time alone. I told you last night that he didn't take anything from you and that I'll always support you. Why can't you grasp that?" April grew increasingly emotional while I continued to stare at her calmly. My food finally swallowing, I said, "Let's save this discussion for after the kids are in bed. I listened to you last night, even though I was uncomfortable, but I won't talk about this while the kids are awake." April seemed to calm down and started smiling again. "Thank you for that. I think you had some good points, but your words hurt me. I'll take the boys. I'll go up and talk to them in a minute." She passed by me and put her hand on my shoulder, and I flinched at the touch. She took her hand back. I felt disgusted by that simple gesture. With the kids, I tried to act normal, but I knew everything was about to change. I'd come to terms with the fact that April's actions had shattered it all. I thought maybe I should just play the role of the compliant husband and accept her terms. Wait until she's done with her affair. After all, hadn't she claimed she still loved me and wanted to remain married? But I knew I couldn't do it, not now, not ever again. Around 9 o'clock, April came into the room where I was sitting, let out a big sigh, sat down in a chair, and smiled. I put the kids to bed, and they fell asleep. They're getting too big to tuck in, but they still say good night and act like they're sleeping. They're good boys. I agreed, they're great kids. It's too bad that they'll have to endure so much pain, and I'm unsure how to ease their suffering. What do you mean? I thought you understood that nothing needs to change, just give me what I want, and we can return to being the same family we were. Just be patient. It'll all be over soon. You won't lose anything. I love you deeply and want to remain. I'm your wife, and I just have to do this." I looked at the woman who had been my wife for the past 8 years. I married her because I couldn't imagine life without her. We had 2 great kids and a solid marriage until last night. Now everything was different, and she couldn't understand why I thought it was necessary. I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty now, but I need it to be clear. April, I heard you out last night. You made your desires clear. You claimed you love me and want to be my wife. You insist he doesn't take anything from me, refuse to disclose his identity because it's none of my business, and you outline the consequences if I am not going to get into the nitty-gritty tonight, but I do need to be clear. April, I heard you out last night. You made your desires clear. You said you love me and want to be my wife. You're adamant that he doesn't take anything from me. You won't disclose his identity because it's none of my business. You outlined the consequences if I pursued a divorce. You made it abundantly clear that you'll strip everything from me without hesitation, just as you said you threatened to take everything, even my boys. That much was evident. April, listen. Her face displayed anger. She wasn't pleased with my recap of her words, but they sounded different to her. You made it pretty clear that you're going to take everything from me, just like you said you would. You even threatened to take our boys. April, you could see that you were angry. You weren't happy with what I said about your words, but you could see that they were true. I think you don't see this situation the way I do, Chris. I told you that this isn't about our marriage, but you didn't listen. Why can't you trust me when I say that I still love you and want to keep our marriage going? What did you hear from me? I'm telling you, April was openly disrespectful towards me and our marriage last night. When I expressed frustration, you got all worked up and started throwing around threats. You'd clearly thought this through and planned it all out. You're just disdainful of all the work I've put in over the years. You belittle me, degrade me, threaten me, and accuse me of misunderstanding. April, you were totally out of line last night. I told you how I felt, and you just kept on acting like I didn't matter. You said you knew I'd react the way I did, but you had no idea why. You thought you had it all figured out, but you were wrong. I was starting to get mad. I kept it together, but I was losing it. You knew I'd react this way, didn't you? So why'd you decide to do something about it? What did you think you were doing, anyway? I was starting to get mad. Up until then, I'd kept it together, but I was losing it. April, you looked so angry. I figured out something last night, and you didn't seem to get it. You threatened me and put me in a tough spot, thinking I couldn't get out. I mentioned it then, and I'll say it again now. Even a rat fights when it's backed into a corner and has nothing to lose. With that, I stood up. I walked away, and when I got to the kitchen door where April was sitting, I paused. I'm going to stay somewhere else for the night, temporarily. I'll return after work so the kids won't notice anything right away. Why are you planning to stay somewhere else? Why not stay here? We can't resolve this problem if you leave, Chris. Please. Don't I love you? Don't I want to keep you? I don't know what I'll do if you leave me. Chris, let's try to work this out. There's got to be a way to make this work. I'm sorry, April. The only thing I know for sure now is that I don't love you anymore. Your cheating last night made me hate you. I'm not sure what I'll do next, but I'm pretty sure there's no turning back now. Chris, have you forgotten your vows to love and cherish me? You also promised on our wedding day to forsake all others, yet you didn't. You promised to love only me, but you shared what we had with another man. I cared for you, loved you, upheld our marital vows, and gave you everything I had. It wasn't enough for you. You gave what was mine to someone else. You gave it away, shattering my love in the process. So, yes, I can move past this. You shattered my love for you into pieces. I can depart, and I will. I headed to Clyde's house, where he welcomed me to stay as long as I needed, time to finish what we started. Soon it'll all be over, and I'll begin a new one. In the following days, I balanced work with evenings spent with my kids. However, I avoided any further interaction with April, despite her attempts to engage. I walked away each time. On one occasion, she yelled, but I just left without a word. During a work break, a colleague told Clyde that the preparations were done and we'd have the results in a few days. All that was left was patience. Everything stayed the same until the following week. Every evening, I came back to an increasingly agitated April. The kids seemed oblivious, but Charlie's. Clyde just left without saying a word during a work break. A colleague told him that everything was ready and we'd have the results in a few days. All that was left was to be patient. Everything continued like normal until the following week. Every evening, I came back to an increasingly worried April. The kids seemed oblivious, but Charlie's question about my long hours made me feel better. He seemed satisfied, and the crisis passed for a moment. April kept asking questions, but I ignored her. She left when she took the kids to bed. By the end of the week, Clyde came into the break room and gave me a folder without saying a word. I opened it to find a short report. Carl Cummings, a 24-year-old, who had been in the program for about a year. My boss was cool about my long hours, and April was happy and things seemed fine. She kept asking questions, but I just ignored her and left when she took the kids to bed. Then Clyde came in and gave me a folder without saying anything. I opened it and saw a short report about Carl Cummings, a 24-year-old junior attorney at Lincoln Rice and Holmes. They got divorced 2 years ago, and he's got money and living in an apartment where April had gone a bunch of times that week. Now I had a name and address, and I thought about what kind of charm he had that I didn't get. But it wasn't my problem anymore. Maybe April should have come to me earlier, and things would have been different. So what's next? What should I do? I asked Clyde for help, but he's the one in charge here. I'm lucky to have friends and a brother. Clyde was a good man and a hard worker, and that was enough for true friends. But now I needed them more than ever. Everything's underway. The first move happens tonight. I'll call you once it's set. Just keep your phone close. You can inform her and put an end to this mess. I knew it needed to be done, but this wasn't my preferred approach. However, April and her lover left me no choice, and I fought back the only way I could. I wasn't a lawyer or a wealthy strategist. I was a mechanic, a hard-working individual who he was proud of providing for his family through his honest work. I loved April, but I wasn't enough for her. My plan fit my world, and she'd soon realize it. I joined my family for dinner, as usual. April played with the kids, and I joined the conversations. I was nervous, but I concealed it. After dinner, I spent quality time with the kids, playing video games and helping with homework. I played the role of the typical husband and father. April finished the dishes and observed the scene. I was proud of the fact that I was able to provide for my family through honest work. I loved April deeply, but I guess my efforts weren't enough for her. My plan aligned with my world, and she'd soon realize it. I joined my family for dinner, as usual. April engaged with the kids, and I participated in conversations and activities, concealing my nervousness. After dinner, I spent quality time with the kids, playing video games and assisting with homework. I played the role of the typical husband and father. April finished the dishes, observing the scene. She seemed more at ease, perhaps thinking everything would soon return to normal as I played video games with my boys. Carl Cummings left his office and headed to his car, parked across town. He reflected on the intense encounter with April at his place 2 days earlier. She was eager for him, agreeing for the first time to get close when he asked why. After their rendezvous, she revealed, Carl Cummings seemed more relaxed, thinking everything would return to normal soon. He played video games with his friends. Carl left his office and went to his car, parked across town. He thought about the intense encounter with April at his place 2 days earlier. She was eager for him, and Carl agreed to get close for the first time. After their rendezvous, she revealed that her husband had discovered their affair. Carl was shocked, but she reassured him, saying not to worry. It seemed odd to him that her husband's knowledge seemed to heighten her adventurousness. Despite this, it was the best physical engagement he'd had, so he brushed it off. Carl walked past an alley toward his car, and suddenly stumbled, feeling a pull as he struggled to maintain his balance. Carl was shocked when he learned about the affair. He was reassured by her, though, that it was no big deal. It seemed like her husband's knowledge made her more adventurous, which was weird. But it was the best sex he'd had, so he didn't think much of it. He was walking down an alley toward his car when he suddenly stumbled. He felt someone pull him down the alley toward the courtyard. 2 people grabbed him and held him against the building's wall. They had ski masks on, so he couldn't see their faces. They were big and scary. He didn't have much cash, and he didn't have any fancy accessories. He wondered what they wanted. A third masked man wearing gloves stepped forward and lifted Carl's face with a firm grip under his chin. In a harsh voice, he asked, "You know April Phillips?" The mention of her name sent a shiver down Carl's spine. Oh no, so that's what this is about. Her darn husband. She never mentioned he was involved. No, I don't know anyone by that name. A third guy in a mask, wearing gloves, stepped forward and lifted Carl's face with a firm grip under his chin. In a low voice, he asked, "You know a woman named April Phillips?" The mention of her name made Carl shiver. Oh no, so that's what this is about. Her darn husband. She never mentioned he was involved. No, I don't know anyone by that name. He stammered, shaking, yet determined to deny everything. The big guy landed a blow to his ribs, causing excruciating pain and stealing his breath. Dizzy, he saw stars swirling before him. The intense agony gripped him, instilling deep fear. I'll ask again. You know a woman named April Phillips? Unable to deceive any longer, Carl abandoned denial. Yes, I know her. He stammered, shaking but determined to deny everything. The big guy landed a hit to his ribs, causing excruciating pain and making it hard to breathe. Dizzy, he saw stars swirling before him. The intense pain gripped him, instilling deep fear. I'll ask again. You know a woman named April Phillips? Idiot. Carl abandoned denial. Yes, I know her. Please God, let me make it out of here alive. He prayed silently. You'll never cross paths with her again. The imposing figure awaited his response. Crystal clear. Got it. Perhaps it was merely a warning. He could accept that. I need to ensure you grasp this fully. My pals and I aren't convinced someone like you messing with other men's wives is all that bright. Please God, let me make it out of here alive, he prayed silently. You'll never cross paths with her again. The imposing figure awaited his response. Crystal clear. Got it. Perhaps it was merely a warning. He could accept that. I need to ensure you grasp this fully. My pals and I aren't convinced someone like you messing with other men's wives is all that bright, the big man explained ominously. They ceased their pressure against the wall, allowing him to steady himself. The initial blow struck him hard in the groin, causing him to double over. Despite his agony, they prevented him from collapsing, delivering another blow to his ribs. A sharp click signaled a broken rib, then came a devastating. The big guy said, I'm sorry, Mrs. Phillips. It was my fault, and I'm really sorry. I won't contact you or your kids anymore. They let him steady himself, and then they hit him really hard in the groin. He doubled over, and they stopped him from falling down. Then they hit him again in the ribs, and he heard a click. It was a broken rib. Then they hit him really hard in the jaw, and he almost passed out. They kept hitting him in the groin until he blacked out. They probably kept hitting him until they stopped. When he came back to, he heard them saying a few words over and over. He remembered everything, and then he woke up in the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. His injuries weren't life-threatening, but he was in a lot of pain. Carl got a nasty blow to the jaw that almost made him fall over. He was in so much pain that he couldn't think straight. He was hit in the groin a bunch of times until he passed out. When he came to, he was in the emergency room at Memorial Hospital. They kept hitting him with words, trying to get him to remember something. His memory was a bit fuzzy, but he was in a lot of pain. They put him in a hospital room and gave him a lot of medicine. They said he might be able to talk to the woman he hit, and he needed to say the right things. He remembered what he wanted to tell her. I'm sorry, Mrs. Phillips. It was my fault, and I'm really sorry. I won't talk to you or your kids anymore. Sorry, our paths ever crossed. Farewell. Carl reclined on the bed awaiting her call. He went over these words in his mind to avoid any errors. He reminded himself that any deviation would not go unnoticed and the consequences would be severe. Repeating the phrases to himself once more, he vowed never to pursue a married woman again, regardless of who she may be. Just past 8 in the evening while playing Sorry We Met by Carl. Sitting on the bed, waiting for her call, Carl thought about what to say. He knew he couldn't make a mistake. Any slip-up would be serious, and Carl didn't want any drama. He repeated the words in his head, making sure he got them right. He promised himself he'd never date a married woman again, no matter who she was. It was just after 8 in the evening, and Carl was playing with the twins. My cell phone rang. I excused myself to another room and took the call. When I heard Clyde's caller ID, I knew it was important. I heard a short message. It's done. Lesson 1 completed. He was admitted to the hospital. Then the call ended. I went back to the living room with a smile. April noticed, but she didn't say anything. She smiled back, thinking it was good news. Later, April took the kids upstairs, and I saw her cast A with the twins. My phone rang, so I excused myself to another room. I took the call, and I heard a brief message. It's done. Lesson 1 completed. He was admitted to the hospital, then the call ended. I returned to the living room with a smile. April noticed, but she said nothing, just smiled back, like she thought it was good news. Later, April took the kids upstairs, and she looked at me like she was wondering something, but she said she'd be there when she returned. She smiled a big smile and went about putting the kids to bed. I waited in the living room, waiting for something to happen. April came back with a coffee pot and cups. She said we could talk more, and I could tell she was worried about losing me. She said she loved me and was scared of losing me. I looked at her, confused, and she just smiled and said she'd be there when she got back. She went to put the kids to bed and I sat in the living room waiting. April came back with a coffee pot and cups, and said we should talk more. I could tell she was worried about losing me, but I thought, this is nothing compared to how deep our relationship is. I looked at her as she spoke, and I could still see how beautiful she was. I'd loved her for so long, and I wanted to grow old with her. But now, all that was over. I need to tell you something, and I need you to listen, I said. I started. I know your lover's name is Carl Cummings, a junior associate at Lynn, Kahn, Rice, and Holmes. I know all about him, including your 2 meetings with him this week. April appeared surprised, poised to respond, but I motioned for her to remain silent. That's the issue. You threatened me with divorce when I expressed my anger. You threatened to strip away everything I have. I remember your exact words, etched into my mind. You said, take everything you have. You said more, but those were the words that stuck with me. Those were the words dripping with contempt that shattered our marriage. Those were the words that pushed me into a corner where I felt I had no choice but to watch you get close to another man. I told you the following night that cornered rats fight back. Now, I could see the initial flickers of fear and discomfort on her face. She wasn't sure what was going to happen, but she was smart enough to know it wouldn't be good for her. Her shoulders got tense, and she instinctively pulled away. I know you told Robin that I never made you feel the way you felt with him, that you were his mistress. I continued, I don't regret that this will end badly for you. But Mr. Cummings has been explicitly informed that. I'm not sure what's coming, but I'm smart enough to know it won't be good for me. Her shoulders went up, and she automatically moved her head back to protect herself. I know you told Robin that I never made you feel the way you felt with him, that you were his mistress. I don't regret that. This will end badly for you. But Mr. Cummings has been told that his involvement with you is over. He'll never see you again or be close to you. He was also told not to contact my sons, and he agreed to that. I saw shock and disbelief on her face as I continued. I'll start divorce proceedings, saying you were unfaithful, and I won't ask for spousal support. My sons will get child support, so they'll have everything they need. His involvement with you is finished. He'll never see you again or get close to you. He was also told not to contact my sons, and he agreed. Watching her face show shock and disbelief, I said, I'll start the divorce process. I'll say the marriage was because of cheating, and I won't pay for your kids. As long as you do what you're supposed to, you'll have what you need. But you'll need to work for what you want. I'll take care of the paperwork, and you'll be served. April Rose looked angry. You're crazy if you think I'll agree to this. I'll take everything you have, just like I said I would. She answered back, still acting defiant even though she was scared. She planned to keep on bluffing until the very end, as she hot as long as you do your job, I'll make sure you have what you need, but you'll have to work for it. I'll take care of the paperwork, and you'll be served. April Rose looked angry. You're out of your mind if you think I'll agree to this. I'll take everything you have, just like I said I would. She retorted, still defiant despite her fear. She intended to bluff until the very end, as she had. Why don't you call your Mr. Cummings right now? Let's see his response. Oh, wait. I believe you might need to dial the hospital. That call I received earlier informed me he's in the emergency room at Memorial. I presume the news has reached you by now. Use my phone. I already have his number. April gazed at me in shock. What have you done? What happened to Carl? Oh my God, Chris, what did you do? Why don't you call Mr. Cummings right now and see what he says? Oh, wait. I think you'll need to dial the hospital. The call I got earlier said he's in the emergency room at Memorial. I guess the news has reached you by now. Use my phone. I already have his number. April looked at me in shock. What did you do? What happened to Carl? Oh my God, Chris, what did you do? Why, April? Are you seriously asking me? I've been here at home with you all evening, and I was at work earlier, so I couldn't have done anything to anyone. Why do you think I did something? Why would I even think to injure your lover? You made it abundantly clear that I should stay out of this situation. It's not my concern. My demeanor surely frightened April. She had never seen me like this. I was. April, why are you asking me? I've been here at home with you all evening, and I was at work earlier, so I couldn't have done anything to anyone. Why do you think I did something? Why would I even think about hurting your lover? You made it abundantly clear that I should stay away from this situation. It's not my problem. My demeanor must have frightened April. She had never seen me like this. I was typically calm and passive, never causing injury to anyone. I wouldn't even discipline the children physically, leaving that to her. Now she viewed me differently. My expression was cold and stern, and my eyes were devoid of emotion. April entered the next room, and I overheard her speaking on the phone. She returned with tears in her eyes, collapsing into a chair and staring into the distance. I remained composed. I'm usually pretty chill and laid back, and I don't hurt anyone on purpose. I'm not even the type to physically discipline kids, so I leave that to April. But she saw me differently now. I had this cold, stern look on my face, and my eyes were empty. April went into the next room, and I heard her on the phone. She came back with tears in her eyes, collapsed into a chair, and stared into the distance. I kept my cool. I picked up the newspaper, and I knew what she had heard on the phone. Her lover was breaking up with her. She had to choose between that or getting smacked every time he saw her. That was the ultimatum that three scary guys gave him when they stopped him on his way out of work. They made it clear why they targeted him and what would happen if he dared to see or talk to her. Putting the paper down, I remembered what April had told me on the phone. Her lover was ending things with her. Faced with the choice of that or enduring smacks each time he saw her, that was the ultimatum from three men who caught him as he was leaving work earlier. They made it clear why they targeted him and what the repercussions would be if he dared to see or speak to her. To April again, they made sure he got the message. April dried her tears, took a deep breath, and addressed me. Well, it seems you've gotten your way, Carl. He informed me he never wants to see me again. He mentioned that he'll return all my belongings and has no desire to communicate with me. In that case, you have nothing to worry about. I have legal representation, so they'll handle it. Everything will be taken care of quickly. I told him, setting the newspaper down and standing up to leave. I'll talk to the boys this weekend and explain why we're getting divorced. Maybe they're mature enough to understand right now, or they'll get it later as they get older. As I left, I looked back to see April crying. If I remember your words right, April, you said this affair would be short. I left quickly, putting the newspaper down and standing up. I'll talk to the boys this weekend and explain why we're getting divorced. Maybe they're mature enough to understand right now, or they'll get it when they're older. As I left, I looked back and saw April crying. If I remember right, April, you said this affair would be short and we could go back to normal. I laughed, but I felt bitter. You're still young and pretty, April. Maybe you'll find someone who will go along with your fantasies, someone open to an unusual marriage where you can have multiple partners. That wasn't me, but that's just how I see it. Best of luck. Kids might not understand this, but adults have to deal with the consequences of their actions, and those consequences can be hard.